Okay. I guess it's time. No.
Yeah,
yes,
we have
yes, it is
32
time.
people. Okay. Okay, let's start the meeting then. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the June meeting of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society. My name's Wayne Bossinger. I'm one of two co-presidents of the organization. And I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize all the officers and people that contribute to making the organization work. We have Jim Hammond, who's the other co-president. We have longtime member Helen Wilson, which does a tremendous amount of work. She's vice president, board member, and editor of the newsletter. Eveline Young is our treasurer and board member.
No, I'm not.
Tony Indovino, who was our email coordinator and board member. Toby Chapman, programming coordinator and board member. Todd Miller, programming coordinator and board member. Stanley Klein, who's our membership coordinator and board member. Audrey Glickman, board member and photographer. Jeannie Binstock's a board member. We have Michael Ehrman, who is president emeritus, and Janine Michael is our web designer. So that brings us to good news. It's beginning to look more and more like we'll be able to resume our live meetings in September. I think the Zoom meetings worked out fine, but my own personal opinion is that you can't beat meeting in person. I mean, it's just so much nicer that way. And like to mention, as always, we're looking for new members or people willing to donate to the organization. If you know anyone that's interested or know someone, if you're interested yourself or know someone who is, you can find the application on our website at squirrelhillhistory.org. Tonight's presentation, it's titled Deciphering Presidential Scribbles, and it'll be presented by Squirrel Hill resident Michelle Dresbold. Michelle's an internationally renowned handwriting expert, a personality profiler, author, speaker, artist, and she's going to explain how the signatures, what the signatures of our nation's presidents reveal about their personalities. Most people think you just sign something, that's it, but there's something that can be read into those signatures. And Michelle is the only civilian graduate of the United States Secret Service Advanced Document Examination Program, and she's been providing these services for more than 20 years. July's speaker is none other than our own Vice President Helen Wilson. It's titled Changes in Squirrel Hill's Political Borders. Helen's been studying the history of Squirrel Hill neighborhood for more than 15 years. And she's going to explain how it evolved from primeval forest into an area claimed by both Virginia and Pennsylvania, and to really one of the area's premier neighborhoods. So a lot of things happened to make that possible. As is our tradition, there will not be a meeting in August due to so many people being on vacation. We'll pick it up again in September with a presentation by Ron Barrett titled The Story of Carey Furnace, which, if you're not that familiar, it's a steelmaking facility in Rankin. There's actually quite a connection between Squirrel Hill and the steel industry in the area in many different levels. That'll be followed in October by what promises to be a very interesting, though maybe saddening in a bit, presentation titled Reflections of the Tree of Life Shootings 3 years later by Beth Keseliff. That being said, I'd like to pass the torch on to Michelle and begin our tonight's presentation.
Wayne, excuse me, Michelle, I just wanted to say two things. First, that I know you all might have gotten that announcement about being taped. We do record these, so if you don't want your picture to show, just you can remove your picture by clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner of your box and just removing your name. And the second is, oh yes, please keep yourself muted during the presentation. And after that, we'll unmute to have questions and answers. Okay, sorry, Michelle.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Am I ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, I thought what we would do tonight is, as we said, I'm a personality profiler through handwriting. And I thought I would give you a little lesson through some of the president's handwriting and pick out a few pointers. I'm going only to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. And Todd is going to help me with the graphics. So, Todd, would you be kind enough to show us the very first graphic?
Sure.
Okay, let's take a look at our first few presidents that I'm going to talk about. Let's look at the handwriting of number one, who is William Taft. And we can see his picture. He's that kind of big guy with a pocket watch. Now, when you have handwriting, it can slant to the right, it can go straight up and down, or it can slant to the left. When you have handwriting that slants to the right, think of somebody slanting or pushing themselves towards people, or somebody pushing themselves emotionally towards the world, or towards food, or towards love, or anything. The more right slanted a handwriting is, the more emotionally driven a person is, and they have a harder time stopping themselves from emotions. Now, William Taft obviously had a hard time stopping himself from eating. And you can see that from, as you see his name, it goes right slanted, and by the time you get to the end of Taft, it's almost falling down. And that's somebody who just, my emotions take over. He eventually was 330, I think he was 332 pounds. Now here's an interesting story about William Taft and his right slanted emotional handwriting. William Taft was so big, way bigger than people at that time at least. And he went to take a bath in the White House. He got stuck in the bathtub. It took 6 people to get him out of the bathtub. They had to crack open the bathtub to get him out. So then the White House, they now have a new bathtub thanks to William Taft and his right slanted emotional handwriting. So that is just a fun little fact. I'm just going to point out fun little things we can learn about these presidents that you might not know, and how we might know a little something about them through their handwriting. Now, the second signature belongs to Franklin Roosevelt. Now, handwriting, it can tell you about a person's emotional state and also their physical state. I'm going to point out 2 things in Franklin Roosevelt's handwriting. The very first thing is the very last letter, it's a Y. And if you look at it, that Y at the bottom just dangles. It's incomplete, it dangles. And that, if you think of a body, your lower loops, they represent the lower part of your body. When something goes wrong in someone's body part, if it's in their head, so you'll see a physical problem in the upper loops of a letter. If it's in their middle part of their body, you'll see a problem in the middle of the letters, like the O's and the A's. But if you see something wrong in the lower loops, I call it something's going on below the belly button. Sometimes it's sexual, problems that way, and other times it's physical. If you look at this, you can say that something was wrong in his leg area, which of course, if you know him, it was. People have said that he had polio, but it's now thought that he had Guillain-Barré syndrome. So they don't know, but if you looked at that handwriting, you would know he didn't have anything going on in his leg area. There's something else in his handwriting that I'm going to point out. If you look at the P, the first letter, notice it has a tall point on the top of it. When you have somebody with a tall point on their P, it means they need to get their point across. It can be very, very good if you're a good speaker. They know how to talk, they know how to argue, and they know how to win a debate. Some of your best speakers, attorneys, whatever, have that very tall point on their P. Of course, if you have to deal with a person like that on a personal level, it can be a pain in the neck. But as a good speaker, you will find this pointed on the top of a P, and there it is. Let's go to our third person, and that's our Calvin Coolidge. Now, something you're going to notice a few things in his handwriting. Look at the top part, and you see the C in both his names comes to an X. Do you see that X in there? Shake your heads because I can't hear anybody. But the C goes into an X formation. What does X mean? Like, let's just say there was a sign and it meant no smoking. They'd have a cigarette and an X. It means crossing it out. You're not allowed. You X something out, you obliterate it. It can mean death. It can mean destruction. It's always a sign that the person is thinking of negativity or death. Now, as I told you before, anything above, it goes on in your head, middle part of the body. So this goes on in his head. He has these X's, thoughts of death. It's right there. You can't have X's and not be thinking of death. So it's said that Calvin Coolidge slept at least 15 hours a day. I guess they call him Silent Cal, right? He slept 15 hours a day. Some people said he was really sick. He also suffered from severe depression. His son had died. He blamed himself. Those X's in the head, he was constantly thinking about death. He couldn't really function. When you see somebody, or if you ever meet somebody, or you know somebody, and they keep writing, and all of a sudden they start Xing out their name, you know that they are feeling extremely depressed. Another thing about Calvin Coolidge, if you look at the end of his name, Calvin Coolidge, you see that Y, it ends in a frown. The very, very last letter in his name, it goes downhill like a frown face. You also see, do you see that? That also shows a frown, a depression. When you see, hopefully things go uphill. That's like a smile. But when they go down, that person is depressed. So it's, he complained all the time of problems. His stomach hurt, his head hurt. And was he really physically ill? The thought now is that he was ill, but it was in his head because he was so depressed. So that's just a little interesting thing about Calvin Coolidge. Maybe the reason he was so silent is because he just didn't want to talk. Our fourth person is Abraham Lincoln. And if you look at his handwriting, it doesn't look sophisticated, really. It has a kind of sort of a gentle way, or maybe almost unsophisticated way of writing. But Abraham Lincoln really didn't have much schooling. And if you look at this, he kind of combined the combination of printing, like you look at the R, it's a printed R. It kind of combined printing and cursive. You'll find that in innately very, very intelligent people. So if you look at your handwriting, you're combining forms of printing and forms of cursive. You're actually very, very intelligent. So I'm sure a lot of people in this group do that. So Abraham Lincoln, he really had very limited schooling. And that's really what shows up in his handwriting. Very basically down to earth, not pretentious, no extra little gizmos or little frills that they used to have back in those days. And there it was. And just as an interesting fact, his mother died from drinking milk from a cow that had digested a poisonous mushroom. So just an interesting little fact. And so if you read, a lot of people actually write more like that nowadays. If you look at people's handwriting of all of these, number 4 is actually what more people looks the most modern of all of these, which is interesting. We'll go on, and then when we come back and we're unmuted, you can ask some questions. Let's go to the next one, which Todd, we'll go to the next one. And then we'll go to the next. Okay, now let's look at this. Now, you may remember, let's get the whole screen on, because I think we're missing the last one. Oh, perfect, that's perfect. Now this is Richard Nixon. Now, remember I talked about X's. What do X's mean? Crossing out. What does a cross mean? Where do you put a cross? Death, it's on a cemetery, or an X. Now, Richard Nixon, this is his handwriting from when he was happily president to Watergate. And this is taken from as his presidency was unraveling. Now, if you look at this, you can see that he was unraveling. It started off, you could read his handwriting, Richard Nixon. As it went on and as his presidency was unraveling, he began to unravel until he only became a great big X. Don't notice me, I'm crossing out, I'm done. And there was his X. A little extra interesting thing is you see the very last one, you see it sort of starts with a check mark. We're going to see this a little later on in one of our presidents, but check marks are anger. You can't make curves. You only make angles when you're angry. So where Richard started curvy, it became just an angle. So he started off a little bit not as angry, but as time went on, he was just angry and crossed me out. And this is how you can watch some person and you can diagnose a person's health mentally and physically through their handwriting. And you can diagnose yourself, your own health, through your own handwriting, because you can see what you're going through your handwriting. Let's look at the next slide, or next picture, whatever. Okay, I just thought this was also interesting. The first one is John Kennedy. And I also picked him because he has an X in it. And his last letter in Kennedy is that a Y that just wiggles down. And it doesn't look strong, that Y. It looks collapsed. And it said that he also had such bad back issues that he was on so many drugs as president because he could barely stand without them. And if you look again, sort of where the part of the body where that X is, it will be the middle of his back. That's where he was in pain. And his legs weren't really feeling good or working well at all either. And he looked like a very strong man, but from his handwriting, he physically was a mess. And so I just thought I'd point that out. I brought in Jacqueline Kennedy's handwriting to be the opposite of William Taft. Jacqueline Kennedy's handwriting actually leans to the left. So when you have handwriting that leans to the right, it's emotional. Oh, my emotions take over. When it's straight up and down, my logic rules me. But when it leans to the left, that person pulls back. Emotionally, you won't know anything that person's really thinking. They won't express their emotions. They're pulling back. Like if you were to, let's say you were dealing with a person like this, you won't really know what she's thinking. It's always going to put on a good show. Never will those emotions come out. It's always trying to be perfect, trying to make everything look good, but you'll never know emotionally what a person whose handwriting pulls to the left is really thinking. Let's go to the next person. I'd like you to try something, and I kind of gave you a hint with Richard Nixon about that angle when he was feeling a little destroyed. I'd like you to do this, and you have to do this with me because it's a little hard talking and not getting feedback, so I need you to physically do the feedback with me. I want you to take your hand, and I want you to make angles. Everybody like this, angles, everybody together. Now I want you to take your hand and make curves. La da da dum, dee dum, da dum. Come on, curves, everybody. Da da da. Make the curves big. Da dum, da da. Now, I want you to close your eyes and do the same thing. Make angles. Chop, 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 chop. And now I want you to close your eyes and make circles. Do do dum bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. And I want you to get into your head and see if you felt physically or emotionally especially, any different. Now we can't interact too much on Zoom, but I can guarantee you that when you did these angles, it was hard to relax, right? And if I were to ask you, where did you feel calmer? I'll guarantee you, everyone, unless you're a little wacky, felt a little calmer doing circles. When you make angles, in fact, do make angles, everybody, and try to relax. Try it. Make angles and try to relax. Try to feel calm. You can't do it. So someone who makes a lot of angles is tough, angry, competitive, and aggressive. And this is Donald Trump's handwriting. The first handwriting is when he was running originally for president. It's angular, not as angular as the one we see underneath. So his handwriting became more angular, tighter, more squished. I would have liked to have gotten handwriting from this year, but I couldn't. But this did take a span of like 3 years of handwriting. And you also notice in the middle of his handwriting, there are 2 X's where Donald and Trump meet. And he also did think about destruction and death, whether it's of his own or to other people. And also, he has a fear of death. He won't eat like, I hear one of the reasons he eats at McDonald's so often is because he's afraid someone will poison him. And there's that X right there. So you know he has this fear of death. But those angles, it's a hard, tough, never relaxed, and aggression, and I'm gonna win no matter what. And there it is. Ideally, you want a combination of some curves and some angles. You want some softness, some gentleness, and you want some angles. Too many curves, what do you have? You have a teenage girl. Too many angles, what do you have? Somebody who's going to win at all costs. So I just thought, now this is the one I really find very interesting. I want you to look at this very last sample. We have, that's Donald Trump's signature up top, but whose signature is at the bottom? If we were interacting, I'd say, whose signature is that? Can everybody see that this signature at the bottom? When I first saw this, I actually thought that was a joke, that Donald Trump wrote Melania Trump's signature. That's Melania Trump's signature.
That's what I thought.
I thought it was actually a joke because I thought he or somebody had fun imitating Donald Trump's handwriting and making it into Melania Trump's signature. but it's not a joke. That is her signature. And, you know, there were all these things. Does Melania really like Donald? Are they really happily married? All those other things. And I said there, if you look at those signatures, they are so much alike. What does it mean when somebody has a like signature or like writing? People sometimes say, oh, I write just like my mother. I go, well, that means you are like your mother. You know, you or like your sister, or you are like a friend. When you have handwriting and it's similar to somebody else's, it means that your personality and your basic functioning, if you want to call it that, you function very similarly. So if you were going to have negotiation between these two, they'd be both as tough as nails. So Melania Trump is no pushover. She's as tough as nails. And it's interesting if you really look at this, on almost every single time Donald Trump and Melania Trump signed their name, if you look at the T in her last P, they always cross and form an X together. And almost every single time they both write their names. I wish I could, you know, point on the screen, but if you look at his last letter and her last letter, they come together. There it is. They come together and they form an X. And it's every single, almost every single one I've seen. They go together, forming that X. So I thought with that, I would open it up now to questions. And why don't we open up the screen and ask anybody have a question? And meanwhile, I have my book, which is not showing up for whatever reason on my screen. But if anybody wants to read a really good book, I will tell you later. But it's Sex, Lies, and Handwriting. You can get it off of Amazon, or you could call me and I can get you a copy. But Sex, Lies, and Handwriting by Michelle Dresbold. And I would love you to buy it. So any questions at all, I'm happy to answer. Marlene has raised it.
I was curious about Franklin Roosevelt's. It's hardly legible. And when you said that about Abraham Lincoln, that, well, he was a lawyer. I don't know if that's considered schooling, but his was the most legible of all the three that you showed. And then John Kennedy's too. I would have never guessed, and Trump's. I couldn't guess that those who they were.
Right. When you have handwriting and it's very readable, that person is saying, read me. I have nothing to hide. What you see is what you get. When you have handwriting and you can't read it, it's a form of communication. It's saying, I'm keeping a little bit of a secret persona for you. So probably of all, you know, that's, and also we have signatures. We also have the rest of handwriting, and they may or may not be the same. Your signature is how you are showing yourself to the world.
And then about Jacqueline, I'll finish. Jacqueline Kennedy's reminds me of what we used to call prep school handwriting, which really leaned to the left, now that you mention it, and was almost printing as opposed to cursive writing. We used to call that, and I never thought about it. I just thought it was the way they were taught.
We're all taught, and then we have a choice to stay like how we're taught or change how we're taught. And it is possible that people who do kind of, especially go to prep school, are taught in many ways not to express their emotions and to be observant. So we are a product of our environment and everything around us. So, but there's plenty of people that I've seen handwriting like Jacqueline Kennedy's, and they're always perfect. If you go to their house for dinner, I guarantee you they have the right forks and the right knives and the right napkins. But we are a product of our background. unless we choose not to be. So thank you for those questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have one. What do you think about the fact that they aren't teaching cursive anymore? And will you still be able to tell what things from people's writings if it's printed and not written?
Thank you. What's your name, by the way?
Marianne.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Thank you for that question. Much of what I look at is printing. So I'm printing cursive. I can still tell 90% of the same. I can tell you this, though, that before the United States stopped teaching cursive, there was a town in Mexico that said, why do we need cursive? And they stopped. And progressively, they found that the students had lower score tests on their lower scores on their academic tests. And in the United States, they've kept wondering why, and progressively in the last, I guess, 9 years, why when they go for the SAT scores, have our scores gone down? Is it that our kids are stupider? Is it the teachers? Is it this? But progressively, especially in English and language skills, students' scores have been very much lower than they have in the past. And I don't know if you've read a book, I think it's called Blink. I'm not sure. It talks about that what you see now may not be the answer. You might have to trace it back. But as they trace back, when they stopped teaching cursive, as those students got older, their test scores were worse. So when you don't teach somebody, especially boys, how to use their eyes, head, and hand to connect letters, it's a skill. And you need a lot of coordination to make cursive writing. So as they've stopped teaching it, especially language skills have gone way down. In schools, they're starting to teach it again. Now, it's one thing if you've learned cursive and you've said, I don't like cursive, I want to go back to printing. That's a choice you have. But if you don't learn a skill, it's like if you don't learn to play piano when you're a kid, it's much, much harder when you're 30 to pick up a piano, or 20 even. Or learn Chinese when you're 5, it's harder when you're 50. So when you don't learn certain skills for your brain as a child, they have found that you miss other skills as you get older. So a lot of schools are reteaching cursive. And I think especially for boys or people with ADHD, you know, you hear all this ADHD stuff nowadays. You have to get brain-hand coordination. And also for anybody who may be a little older, if you want to keep your brain healthy, again, one of the things you can do is sit down and start writing again. Because what are you doing? You're using your brain, eye-hand coordination. If you really want to keep your brain healthy, what do? You pick your right hand to pick up a pen with the left hand. Do your crossword puzzle with the left hand. Write your grocery list with the left hand. Why? Because you're using more parts of your brain. You're keeping your brain healthy. So I think we should teach as many skills as we can. If you later have a choice, you don't want to do it, fine. But I think it's a disservice not to teach it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I think, Joe, you need to unmute yourself, Joe.
Unmute. Okay. I have a question.
Sure. I have an answer.
I'm left-handed.
Okay.
When I was in school, it was difficult for me because everybody else was right-handed. And not only that, but every teacher I had in public school insisted that I write with my right hand. And it was awful. And It's hard to explain, but eventually I learned how to write my name so that people could read it. But it was really awful, and I don't know exactly where it stands now, but I always felt that it separated me from other people. But the other thing it did, it really pushed me to be the best reader and writer that I could possibly be. I did writing and reading every time I got any, if I couldn't think of anything else to do, I would do the right hand, left hand thing for me. And it's pretty much gone, but it was really part of the way I became a person, and I still feel that way.
Okay, Joe, you're very smart, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I figure I just figure you're very, very smart. And for all of us, I'm going to give you, in some ways they did you a disservice, but in some ways they did you a big service, because they forced you to use more parts of your brain, and you forced yourself to use almost all your brain. And for all of us, we have to learn from Joe. We want to be smart like Joe. But the more you use different parts, and like what you did, it opened up different signals, the creative part, the logical part. They actually, frankly, left-handers should be writing in Hebrew or Arabic. But, since you were brought up probably in the United States, it was harder for you. So you had to overcompensate. And that actually used more parts of your brain and more coordination. And so it probably developed you both in creative and logical skills, and you probably used that in your life. So in a way, as hard as it was, it made you who you are. So I don't know. I just, from that background, I just imagine you achieved a lot and that you're quite brilliant. So there's my that's work.
It was a pain, but it was also wonderful.
Yeah. Right.
To be able to make everybody wonder what the hell's wrong with me.
I just tell them you're a genius. That's all.
Yeah, right.
So when you look at Joe's handwriting, would you be able to tell that he's writing with the non-dominant hand and has been doing that for 80 some years?
Well, Joe, do you write with your left hand now?
No, I write with my right hand.
Oh, right hand. I may not be able to know that. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle, perhaps that explains why a number of the recent presidents have been left-handed. That's a good explanation. But I also have a question, and about Trump's handwriting. You said you haven't seen any recent examples, but it seems like some of the statements he's made lately are demonstrably delusional. And would that show up in his handwriting?
Oh, yes. Yes. I would love to. I have a feeling his handwriting would have gotten more squished, even more angular, and probably full of X's. I would, and also I would like to see all of his handwriting, not just his signature, because a signature, as I explained it, is really how you want to be perceived by others, how you feel, your public persona. When you I never write, Michelle Dresbold needs to go to the store and buy a potato. I only write my name for you. You only sign your name for others. So ideally, when you go to really analyze a person, ideally you have signature and body of handwriting. But you still can tell a lot, and a lot of these people that we looked at are their whole being is in public. But I would love to see what his handwriting, not just his signature, is looking like. That would be very interesting for me.
Michelle, in your work, have you detected any trends or tendencies among different professions or occupations based on the handwriting?
Oh, sure, definitely. I mean, well, if you're a serial killer, you make lots of check marks. Okay, like example, let's say you're an actor and actress, or you like to be out in front of public, you have a big handwriting. Engineers, their handwriting tends to be sort of traditional. It can, surprisingly, engineers tend to often write off to the right slanted. Architects are straight up and down. Real organized people have that real pretty handwriting, it's all perfect. More creative people have a little handwriting all over the place. So some people say to me, oh, isn't my handwriting beautiful? I'm like, ugh, you're boring. But no, I'm mean. So yes, I mean, definitely, like people sometimes say, can you guess my profession? And I'll always tell them, I may not be able to guess your profession, but I could guess what you should be doing. So, yes. Any other questions?
Michelle, can you tell if someone has carpal tunnel? Because I do. And it affects my handwriting tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think what I've noticed is at the very beginning, when I first start to write, it's worse than later on, like, because pain initially is it's worse, and then it gets,
your hand will warm up. But I sometimes tell people, like, if they ask me to analyze their handwriting, I do want to know if they have a physical ailment that might hinder their handwriting. But I can tell you this: if you have carpal tunnel, or you write with your left hand, or you write with your foot, or whatever, I will still be able to tell the same traits, because even though you don't realize certain things that you're doing, and obviously this is easier for me to demonstrate in person, but the same exact things you would do with carpal tunnel, it may look more jaggedy and it may not be as smooth, but you'll still dot your I about the same height, and you'll cross your T about the same height, and you'll connect your letters the same way. So it will look less smooth, but your basic things that you do will be the same.
I remember a long time ago, you told me that, not that long, but
a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
But I think you noticed I was crossing my T's from right to left, and you said I could change my outlook by going the other way, because I'm going forward, going from left to right. So
right.
We can change ourselves and our moods by some things we can do with our handwriting. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. And in fact, I pointed out something, and now I understand why you did that cross T. When you cross a T and you cross it going from left to right, you're moving from past to future. It's very possible, and I had at that time probably didn't realize you were into the Historical Society, that you went back to the past. So that's interesting. I probably didn't know that, but ideally you want to go towards the future, but your goals were towards the past, which, but anyhow, and remember, I'm going to give you a story about myself. We looked at Franklin Roosevelt, that getting that point across, and that can be very, very good if you're a debater, or you're a president, or you're an attorney. It can be very bad in your personal life or your social life, that you always have to get your point across. And I used to have a pointed P top, and I really worked very hard on getting a more, not the point, a more curved P because I didn't want to be combative. So I worked on my handwriting and worked on it in my head to try to not have a certain trait in my personality. So if you can really work on something, doing a physical motion with them and mentally trying, or an emotional, trying to get it together by doing physical and emotional, your chances of success go way higher when you combine those two issues. So if you see you have a problem, or I see you have the problem from the handwriting, and you choose to work on it both in your handwriting and in your life, and say whatever it is, I feel confident, I'm moving ahead, and you make your eyes really big, you will feel much more confident than if you just go, I'm okay. But here you are doing a physical motion to go with an emotional choice. So, good question, Helen. I like that.
Do languages that go from right to left work the same way? Can you look at people's handwriting and judge the same things?
Ideally, I should know which direction you've been taught. But I'm going to give another thought. Think about Hebrew or Arabic. What are they? They are languages or cultures whose belief, just as I was talking to Helen, whose belief system is to really study the past, to really go into the past. So is it a coincidence that they write to the past? Probably not. And I thought about that their basic being is to relive or to bring up or to celebrate their ancient past. So we are, as I said before, who are we? And I know you're a historical group, but we are not just us today. We're everything about us. Now, some of us are, hey, heck with the background, heck with our what went before us. But other people are very much what went on before us, what went on, not just our grandparents, our great-grandparents, but generations and generations and generations. And I really do believe, let's say the Israelis and probably the Arabic communities really do study that past. That's who what their basic system is.
Yeah, I was going to ask about something along those lines about signatures of foreign leaders. For instance, Putin would use the Cyrillic alphabet to sign his name. In Saudi Arabia, they would use that writing, which looks to me like completely straight lines. I don't know how they separate, seriously. And Chinese, which uses the characters. I don't know how Chi signs his name. Would the same thing show up, right and left and up and down and X?
Definitely. I've done tons of lectures. But I also do handwriting for court cases, and I do anonymous letters and threat letters, and I do a lot of very serious type of work dealing with handwriting. So I have to know handwriting from all over the world and what separates one handwriting from culture from another, and have to study different handwriting basis. But so that's a whole nother ballgame. But the same I used to do a lecture with Trump and Kim Jong-un, and I showed, even though you couldn't read the handwriting, how many symbols were alike between their handwriting. How you do not have to know the language. Now, sometimes it's easier for me to do English. Is easier because I know, G's and Y's and I's. But I have to know, example, that Arabic and Hebrew go in this direction. Chinese sometimes goes in this direction. So I know which way to look at it. But often I will take handwriting, I'll turn the whole page upside down so I'm not reading it. I'm just looking at like a picture. I'm an artist also. So I look at it like a painting. How does this painting look? Is it dark and heavy and angry, or is it light and beautiful? So no, I mean, every language, I mean, sometimes it helps not to be able to see it or read it. I do like to know how that person is taught, because there's things they learn, like I studied with the Secret Service, and we had to learn a lot about Nigerian handwriting. I mean, because Nigerian in the Nigerian government has a whole thing where their body of, what's that called when you make a lot of their economy was built on forging things. So we had to really study Nigerian writing. And you had to know, like, they put little dots in certain places. So if you saw one, you're going to go, oh, I know it's this person, there's a dot. That's how they were taught. So, but no, the same exact, that angles and curves. I don't care if you're Chinese, Arabic, or Swahili, angles will come up when it's an angry Swahili. Now, if a culture, I'll give you something else. Go back and look at old, like German handwriting during the Second World War or pre. What was it? It was all angles, 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 angles. What was that? An angry, competitive handwriting, an angry people. They've actually changed the Germanic way, their alphabet, after the Second World War, because they didn't want to continue with such an angry people. So they've actually softened the script. Because as we did that curve and the angles, you could feel that you got more angry the more you put angles in your hand, and you calm down more curves. So it doesn't matter what language. And in fact, if you just, let's say you're having an angry day, which I'm sure we all have had, just start making curves. You'll calm your body down. So thank you. Any more questions? We have like I think 6 more minutes, or any questions about anything in the world. I'll answer anything, the moon, the sun. So,
Okay, Michelle, I think someone else have a question? Go ahead if they do.
if not, just to remind you, Sex, Lives, and Handwriting. If anybody wants to contact me, I have a website, michelledresbold.com. And I'm happy to help you with anything you need.
Now, if someone wanted to buy your book, is that where they go, to your website, or?
Yeah, you can go to my website, michelledresbold.com, and you can either contact me, or it will take you, if you go michelledresbold.com, it will also take you to Amazon, where you can buy the book too. I mean, you can buy it from me too, or you buy it from Amazon, either way.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I guess we can call it an evening. And thank you, Michelle, from everyone here listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it was great. It was great. It really was.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
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 Call me.
Hi, Rana.
Hi, Michelle.
How
Talk
are
to
you?
you soon.
Bye.
Bye. So.